And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning starting off with a lot of IFR here over the western part of the state. Also another batch up there over the Brooks Range with marginal VFR out to the Arctic coast. And then kind of a mix here over the eastern and southeast interior of the state with some VFR and IFR thrown in, with IFR mostly over the Copper River Basin of the Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, as well as most of the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, diminishing IFR, but still holding here over the western interior right out to the coastline. And IFR up along the Brooks Range there and southward into the upper Yukon Valley area. And areas of IFR along the North Gulf Coast into the northern southeast coast, with the southeastern panhandle still seeing some IFR there. Otherwise, marginal VFR here, Kodiak Island and the Gulf of Alaska, as well as all of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And for Saturday morning, no change out here to the west. Widespread marginal VFR over the entire area there. A lot of IFR here, southwestern interior down into Bristol Bay, right on up into the west central interior areas here. And still some lingering IFR up here to the northeast, but look at the VFR showing up now for the western Arctic coast and in the Tanana Valley area, with marginal VFR here for south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, Kodiak Island, into the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, band of IFR shifting northward there from the Pacific into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. IFR here, Kotzebue Sound across the Seward Peninsula down there to the Yukon Delta, and also on the eastern and southern slopes of the Alaska Range here, a zone of IFR. And IFR there for Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai Peninsula area, and toward, up toward Valdez, and then Panhandle, not too bad. Mostly VFR, and a good zone of VFR showing up here north of the Alaska Range there. Tanana Valley there, 40-mile country, right on up in toward the Yukon River area. And for passes for tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, mostly IFR throughout the day. Friday, and for Lake Clark and Merrill and Rainy, all looking marginal VFR for the western Alaska Range. Windy, IFR, Isabel IFR, back to marginal for Mentasta, as well as Tanita. And for Portage, IFR, also IFR for Chilkoot and White. And moving on to the freezing levels here, we've got surface tomorrow morning, northern Bristol Bay, just south of the Pribilof Islands, but north of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And freezing levels running about 2,000 to 4,000 feet here across the southeast coast. So moving on to icing, areas of isolated moderate icing here, central eastern interior from the Arctic coast, right on down into the Alaska Range and northern Cook Inlet possibly, and some possible considerable moderate icing there along the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat back toward possibly Cordova, and then some more icing possibilities out here over the western and central Aleutians. Looking at the jet stream here, kind of a general trough of low pressure over the Bering Sea, covering much of the central and eastern Bering Sea here with higher pressure to the west. At any rate, the stronger jet to the south there of the Aleutians, and then it kind of reappears here and moves in mostly across British Columbia, but 75 knots there for the southeast coast and maybe southwest 65 knots for the eastern Arctic coast. And for 9,000 feet, south to north mild flow here up to 45 knots coming into Prince William Sound and the Copper River Basin, more of a southwest direction, and lighter as you head south across the Panhandle. And again, low pressure here over the eastern Bering Sea. Wind's pretty light out in that area, right on down to the Aleutians. And for 3,000 feet, this system out here to the southwest, bringing some southeast winds at about 40 knots there from Adak westward. Light winds across the southern Bering Sea and much of interior Alaska. Stronger winds up here, 50 knots out of the east for the western Arctic coast. And 45 knots from the south-southeast here coming up to the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. And for turbulence, look for considerable moderate turbulence possible anywhere here in the shaded area for much of the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, back down into Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island. Also some moderate mechanical turbulence there for the western Arctic coast, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, as well as St. Lawrence Island, and then out over the western Aleutians, heavier stuff mostly west of Adak on out to Shimei and Attu.